Hello everybody, my name is Madeleine Lerch and I'm presenting today on graphic organizers as a reading comprehension intervention for students with learning disabilities. Students with learning disabilities are known to feel challenged when reading new texts in academic context, and they feel especially challenged when they need to understand what they're reading. So, Kim and her colleagues did a meta-analysis on graphic organizers and found that they would enhance reading comprehension. They're composed of semantic maps, story maps, and concept maps. Students with learning disabilities often feel challenged when reading new texts in an academic context, especially when it comes to understanding what they're reading, and therefore graphic organizers would be an excellent intervention. And Kim and her colleagues looked at graphic organizers and found them to be found them to enhance reading comprehension. For example, there's semantic maps, story maps, or concept maps that students could make use of. It is also known that students with learning disabilities have strong visual abilities, and presenting information in a visual form helps them to understand facts and terms and ideas, planning, and relationships within the learning task, and retain information for a much longer period of time. So, to enhance reading comprehension, teachers can use graphic organizers to improve organization and recall of verbal information for students with learning disabilities. Students with learning disabilities have strong spatial visual conceptualization ability, and this helps them to understand visual displays and helps with facts and terms, ideas, planning, relationships within a learning task, and they retain information for a very long time afterwards. So, to enhance reading comprehension, teachers can use graphic organizers to improve organization and recall of verbal information for students with learning disabilities. Story maps allow students to identify important story elements in the text, like characters, plot, setting, and uh, concept diagrams improve reading comprehension in students with learning disabilities. Story maps are one form of graphic organizers, and they allow students to identify important story elements like characters, plot, and the setting of a story. So this is an example of a story map, and it has several boxes, and in the first box you would put the characters of that story, and then in the next box the setting, the place, and the time of the story, when the story takes place. And then there are other boxes in which sequentially you would put how the story unfolds. Story maps. This is an example of a story map, and it has many boxes. And the first box you would put in the characters of the story. The second one, the setting and place and time that the story is happening. And then there are boxes that you can fill in sequence how the story unfolds, and to understand what is happening. Concept diagrams visually present relationships to help link ideas, And students with learning difficulties often have great trouble with linking ideas. So it's helpful when students can create their own concept maps and evaluate their understanding of the information they're learning. And then concept diagrams visually present the relationships to help link ideas. Students who have learning disabilities often find it very difficult to link ideas. And so they can create their own concept maps to evaluate their understanding of the information that they learned. And this is an example of a concept diagram, a fish, and the spine of the fish is help students to find the main idea of the text and identify and describe details which they would put in the bones of the fish, all the different details and results associated with the text. So this helps students to see the cause and effect of the story. And here's an example of a concept diagram, which is a fish. And basically, the spine of the fish is helps students to find the main idea of the text, and then the bones of the fish can be used to identify results associated with that main event, so students see a cause and effect in the story. Semantic maps focus on key vocabulary and concepts within a text. They help students derive implicit and explicit meaning from ideas and also to identify related concepts. And it has been found that students who create their own semantic maps outperform those using conventional reading techniques on tests of comprehension. Semantic maps focus on key vocabulary and concepts within a text. They help students to derive implicit and explicit meaning from ideas and identify related concepts. It was found, Kim and al. Also found that students who create their own semantic maps outperform those using conventional reading techniques on tests of comprehension. This is an example of a semantic map, and the story is about an apple. So the middle circle would be apple, and then all the other circles would represent everything that is related to apple, and then that would form the story for the semantic map. And here's an example of a semantic map. It was a story about an apple. So apple is in the middle because it's the main idea of the story, and then anything to do with apple you would put around the apple. Any ideas, any other concept that has to do with apple. Using graphic organizers is helpful for all grade levels, but studies have found that a positive outcome when they focus on upper elementary and secondary grade levels. They're also useful for other subjects, not just reading comprehension. For example, math, science, and history, you can use graphic organizers to better understand those texts. And there's a positive outcome for using graphic organizers regardless of who generates them, whether it's teachers, researchers, or students. But studies have shown that students who generate their own graphic organizers have a much larger effect. students from all grade levels can use graphic organizers, whether it's, elementary students or high school students, university students, and anyone can use them because studies have shown that the outcomes are positive, and especially on upper elementary and secondary grade levels students. There are also semantic organizers or graphic organizers, also useful for other subjects, not just reading comprehension. You can use them for math, science, and history, and they're very helpful. Positive outcomes, regardless of who generates the graphic organizers, were found. Teachers can use them, researchers, or students. But these studies also found that when students generate their own graphic organizers, the effects have been much larger. Now, how can teachers teach graphic organizers? Well, they can explain the use of the organizer and teach students how context is organized and how graphics work with the use of visual strategies. They can model how to use the methods, and they can guide practices in phases, like they can do the graphic organizer with the whole class, or they can be done in smaller groups, or students can learn from each other doing them. And they can work by themselves and get assistance only when they find it's necessary. And then eventually students are ready to practice independently. Reported to be much larger. How can teachers explain or teach graphic organizers? Well, they can explain the use of the organizers and teach students how content is organized and how graphics work with the use of visual strategies. They can model how to use the method, and they can form guided practices in phases, like with the entire class, or smaller groups, or students can learn from each other or work by themselves and get assistance whenever they need it. And then eventually students are ready to practice on their own. These are some resources for graphic organizers for different age groups, which I found helpful. But there are many resources on the internet that you can find graphic organizers on. And here are some resources of graphic organizers for different ages, which I found useful for myself. But there are many graphic organizer websites on the internet, so you have a big choice.